Reconvene the regular Board of Supervisors meeting of October 21st. We are on the addendum agenda, and we are sitting as the Board of Supervisors. Let the record reflect that all supervisors are present. We now move on to item 4 on the Board of Supervisors agenda. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Miller.
I brought this item up before the board, and I have multiple questions regarding Pima County Board policies that I would like to go through. Specifically, Pima County Board Policy D22.2 on page 1 of 2. The purpose is to establish guidelines for transparency and accountability of expenditures incurred by county departments. And in the background, it says, pursuant to the Constitution and statutes of Arizona, which govern the financial responsibilities of counties. Item 4, elected and appointed offices of the county may not expend monies for a purpose not included in the annual budget adopted by the board or expended monies in excess of the amount specified for each purpose in the budget. Now, the one thing I would like to point out is we have been using contingency funds for donation activities as well as from individual board members, which the contingency funds are budgeted for emergency or unforeseen items for this purpose. In item 5 of this same policy, it says, in order to perform their financial duties, the board may examine and scrutinize all accounts and financial transaction of county officers having the care, management, collection, or disbursement of public monies. And we talk about the county administrator shall, by administrative procedure, prepare appropriate budgetary controls to identify revenues and expenditures by elected and appointed officers in sufficient detail for the Board of Supervisors to oversee compliance with the constitutional and statutory financial responsibility and compliance with the annual appropriations by the Board of Supervisors. Such controls should include, among other controls, periodic reports of significant variance from the major revenue and expenditure categories contained in the adopted budget. Do we have this report, Mr. Huckleberry? Do you do this reporting, and do we have a report that we can look at?
What report specifically?
It's the one prescribed in County Board Policy D22.2, which we put in the background material, and it's under item 5 and then policy item A, and it says the county administrator shall, by administrative procedure, prepare appropriate budgetary controls to identify revenues and expenditures by elected and appointed officers in sufficient detail for the Board of Supervisors to oversee compliance with the constitutional and statutory responsibilities and compliance with the annual appropriations by the Board of Supervisors. And it says such controls should include, among other controls, periodic reports of significant variances from major revenue and expenditure categories. And do we do this report? Do we do this type of activity? And if so, can I get a copy of this report? I have never seen this report.
Madam Chair and Supervisor Miller, the budget document and the budget process contains all of the procedures and policies in developing the annual budget. And the adopted budget is the actual control document with regard to expenditures by category and by object. And those are all identified in the budget itself. And yes, we periodically do, and that's what we call period 1 through typically 14 budget reports that deals with regard to the expenditures of every, we'll say, object area within the budget. So yes, they're prepared once a month, and we can circulate them if people want them.
Are they done? How often are they done?
Done about every month. They're period reports, and typically we have periods 1 through about 14, and obviously that's longer than 12 months, but we have the follow-on reports that deal with, the very end-of-year expenditures that finally, we'll say, track all of those expenditures and put them in the right budget year.
Okay, we've asked for these reports. I would like to get copies of these reports being put on distribution, and I would like to get copies of the ones for the last year if we could get those. And then on policy D29.9, page 2, item 4, responsibility. It says items A through D describe the department head responsibilities and disciplinary action if there is a failure to establish or enforce internal procedures necessary to prohibit unauthorized or improper purchases. Under item 5 of the procedure, it says department heads must ensure internal procedures are followed and that appropriate corrective action is taken to remedy any deficiencies. Do we have these types of policies and procedures in place? Are internal peer audits in place? Are they done and where are they documented? Because they specifically talk about internal peer audits in this procedure.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Miller, those are more than likely our internal audit functions, and they're available.
They are available? And who do we get those from?
The Finance and Risk Manager, but I'll have them made available to the board.
That would be Mr. Burke. Because we have asked for those. And then the county attorney opinion, I had some questions regarding the county attorney opinion that came out last week. On the top of page 3 of the 6 pages, the statutory authority, where you define that. The county has those powers and only those powers expressly granted or necessarily implied by statute. A payment for a purpose that is not authorized by statute is illegal. The county's outside agency program is based on the rationale that if the county has the authority to undertake a particular activity or provide a particular service to the public, it can outsource that activity by providing funding to another entity to do the same. Likewise, the small awards can, and then in capital letters here, we think, be justified if they are being used to fund activities the county itself has statutory authority to undertake. Is the county statutory authority, does it supersede state statutory authority? Because you speak specifically about county statutory authority. Could you please define that? Is it different than state statutory authority, or is it the same?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Miller, the county's authority to act in any area is defined by statutes by the legislature.
Okay. And then of course, according to Goldwater, we don't have the statutory authority, and your utilization of the words "we think" when you discuss these small awards gives me great pause. We think that raises a lot of flags to me that you are not certain. I would think we believe are justified, but you said we think. And in these matters, I believe we should be certain that we are not violating the law. I would like to see a more clarity on that. And on page 3 of 6, you list economic development activities broadly defined, which we do all the time for grants: affordable housing, care and maintenance of the sick, hospitals, fund youth employment training, impound, spay, neuter dogs, and provide for parks and recreation. You then state, any county official making such a small award should ensure that it is being used to fund an activity that is within county authority. Where do we go to find out? Do we need to consult with your office on whether it is within county authority, or where do we go to find out if it is within county authority?
Well, Madam Chair, Supervisor Miller, our office would certainly be one source. The other source, of course, could be the departments that specialize in this. They've been trained and understand and interpret those statutes on a regular basis.
So that would be through the county attorney's office. And then on page 5 of 6, you state someone challenging the legality of these awards, and you're reviewing the specific awards that were challenged or put forth, not challenged. However, could make a colorable argument that these can't be fairly characterized as operating expenses of the supervisors. This is another statement in this opinion that concerns me greatly, that we don't have a definitive, this is legal, there is nothing wrong. I would like to see something more, if we're going to continue this practice, and I know we haven't voted on it yet, but I think when you say someone could make a colorable argument, or you say we think, that gives me great pause. And the fact that the awards are not reviewed and approved by the board as a whole in a public meeting arguably compounds the problem. That's a quote from your document. And your final recommendation is to adopt a specific policy, and I suggest this be crafted with very specific language, not we think, or somebody could make a colorable argument, to ensure that there is no violation of the gift clause, however we do this. My staff, when we found these expenditures, specifically asked for contracts and justification from the procurement department. We were told there was none. One question is, what exactly did we outsource to Planned Parenthood? What activity that would be done by the county would we outsource to an organization like Planned Parenthood, Chicanos por la Casa, among many others, without any written contracts or documentation, not even a memorandum on what the activities were they were to perform. Another example that came up recently, and this was an item that came before the board out of the Board of Supervisors Contingency Fund. There was a group that put on an awards ceremony for County Attorney Barbara Lawal, and the board voted to give her, it was Greater Tucson Leadership, to give Greater Tucson Leadership $5,000 for this party awards ceremony with taxpayer monies. Juneteenth is another organization that gets in the neighborhood of $5,000 every year from the Board of Supervisors Contingency Funds. This is outside of individual supervisors. And I would like a policy that specifically addresses those items as well to ensure that we're not violating the gift clause. And based on what I have read in the state statutes, and I am not an attorney as many appear to think they are, these are gifting to outside agencies without authority, especially in the case of for parties, for friends of elected officials and elected officials. And that is my biggest concern, is I want to ensure that everything we're doing is within the confines of the law, that we're not violating any state statutes. And I believe your opinion left a lot of room for interpretation in terms of we think someone could make a colorable argument, and whatever we decide here today, I hope that we get more definitive language. And that is all I have to say on this item.
On item 4,
Pardon me?
that's your comment on item 4?
That is all the comments I have on item 4, yes.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board? We have 5 speakers, but this is not a public hearing. Do you want to hear from the speakers? Okay. Christopher Cole, 3 minutes. You know the drill.
My name is Christopher Cole, and I reside in Tucson, Arizona. Surprising how that hasn't changed, isn't it? I'm speaking on behalf of the Pima County Libertarian Party. The Pima County Libertarian Party, the Arizona Libertarian Party, and the National Libertarian Party all believe that taxpayer monies should be spent only after an open discussion and vote on the matter. Spending taxpayer money without such discussion and vote is unethical. Mr. Valadez, your proposal of a few weeks ago that you collect the information and present it once a year after the fact is at best an insult. The taxpayers deserve to be informed ahead of time so that they can comment on what you're voting on if they wish. It isn't like you make it real easy for most of the taxpayers in this county to come and comment. And as far as I can remember, you really never voted down spending other people's money on whatever it is. Just a quick comment on last week's little debacle. Those people did not know that they needed to fill out 2 green cards. One for item 4 on the addendum and one for whatever the call to the public item was. I didn't know until I'd been attending the Pima County Board of Supervisors meetings at least 3 or 4 times. You need to put up some information to let people know so that they can speak. This is one of the obstacles you put to people speaking to the board. An obstacle that should not be there. Mr. Straub, I read your opinion on the bus as I was riding home. Your citations of Arizona revised statutes give authority to the Pima County Board of Supervisors as an entity. Those statutes do not give authority to the individual supervisors. The Pima County Board of Supervisors, as far as I know, has never devolved authority from itself to the Pima County individual supervisors. Therefore, if an individual supervisor is acting to give money to these charities or whatever on their own, they are, in essence, stealing authority from the Pima County Board of Supervisors. And that is illegal. And Mr. Straub, I will speak to you further on the subject during call to the audience.
Carol Kovalik? Kovalik, sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm Carol Kovalik, and I am back once again to speak publicly with regard to discretionary spending by supervisors and their yearly funds budgeted under office operations. Having read over the county attorney's memorandum dated October 6th, as released on October 14th, I have several points of concern. First, if allowed to continue, I don't believe the maximum cap of small funds awards of $5,000 is clearly stated often and enough. Better dissemination of this dollar figure needs to be conveyed so as to avoid its breach. Ideally, it should be reduced. That's page 1 of 6. As stated in the second opening paragraph, and given current situations, I believe the county attorney now has an obligation to institute an action in the name of the county to initiate an investigation into and a recovery of funds that could prove to have been illegally spent. Page 2 of 6. Third, I'd like to understand how any county official who's made a small award has assured and can demonstrate assurance that awarded funds were used by the recipient as outlined in the memorandum 6 bulleted undertakings, page 3 of 6. Fourth, please provide and make available for public oversight proof that public benefit requirements were satisfied with respect to provided expenditures. Reasonable assurance, along with documented signed reasonable assurances that funds are and have been used in a manner as stated in the gift clause and can survive any and all challenges, should be maintained and reviewed yearly. If this award practice is continued, that's page 4 of 4. If allowed to continue, consider tightening the verbiage of the broad category operating expense portion of the supervisor's budgets. Rather, operating expense should be for items fairly characterized as such supplies, equipment, eliminating allocation of funds from this budget and allowing it to be deferred to the other county budgets as already established, such as the community service and the funding it provides under the umbrella of funds allocated. That's page 5 of 6. While the conclusion indicates a certain cloudy legality of small awards provided for specific documented public purpose and in reasonable amounts, it is still stated that such action and award could be found as problematic. While a court could uphold this award action, it would cost taxpayers in seeking legal resolution, page 6 of 6. Finally, as per the closing statement within the memorandum's recommendations, I ask that this board, in fact, work to proactively remove this current practice and eliminate its future for potential abuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Hernandez?
Good afternoon. I'd like to say good morning. I wanted to go home early. I'm Richard Hernandez, and I want to address this specific issue by giving you a couple of thoughts. First of all, if you decide not to change your policy, you're going to go to court. Guess who's going to pay for that? The taxpayers. If you look at the statute, it also provides that individuals can sue an individual member of the Board of Supervisors. And I am moving in that direction. I will wait till the outcome of the Goldwater Institute taking Pima County to court. But I want the community to know, people standing behind me, you can sue them too. You should do what I'm going to do, is wait to find out what happens. I think it's really important to note here, this is not about the charitable groups that you give money to. Whether we like them or not, and I know in question is Chicano por la Causa and all those. The truth is, I know they need the money. We all know they need the money. We're not denying that. I'm not denying that. There is a true need for help in all these 501(c)s. We know that. What I shared with you in the past, I'm going to share again, and that is honesty, integrity, take the moral high road. If you want to give money, and if you'll look at the meeting where I spoke to this directly, fine. But tell us. To me, that's the issue. Now we're going to be caught up in court, and who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for the county attorney to represent you? We, the people. It's my belief, and I'm not a lawyer, and I see both sides. I read the lawyer as Chris Straub says it, and then I read it as the people at Goldwater, and I've talked to both attorneys. For the record, I've talked to both attorneys, and they both make valid points. So we're going to be stuck with a judge deciding, is this right, or is it not right? So I'm going to come to you with a whole different perspective, and I'm going to say, make this right before it costs us more money. Let's just stop this practice. Let's be honest. Let's put it on the table. Let's let everybody know how we spend our money, and then there's no need to misuse thousands of dollars, which we're going to do if we go to court. So I'm asking to be reasonable on both sides. I'm asking you to be reasonable.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Martha, you want to talk about budget and roads, is that correct?
Well,
I guess the question is,
yes, I understand the question. I want to talk about this issue, but it is related to how the money is being spent, which does affect.
okay, so you want to talk to this issue, because it says budget and roads, which is really not what is, how this is advertised on the agenda.
Okay, save me from the call.
Okay. I'm just trying to clarify.
It is related. Yes, I think so. It is.
We'll start and then we'll see if it's, okay, okay.
All right, thank you. I have to say something funny. Mr. Huckleberry, Board of Supervisors, thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
And we need your name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry, Martha Michaels, 40-year resident of Pima County. I'm here today to express my concerns regarding the practice that some supervisors have been using money, sometimes many thousands of dollars, out of their annual office budgets to make donations to charities of their own personal choice. Besides the obvious concerns about the ethics and possible legality of this practice, I'm further concerned about what this indicates for the handling of the Pima County budget in general. How you spend the money affects me, it affects my neighborhood. For many years, our HOA has tried to get our roads repaved. Our roads last repaved 28 years ago are crumbling, and we feel the condition of our roads has become a public safety issue. In February of 2013, we made a presentation of our problem to Supervisor Miller. We then advised as advised, submitted a petition for road repairs signed by almost everyone in our community. After following these appropriate procedures, and with Supervisor Miller's assistance, we were prioritized in December 2013 for repaving our roads. We were then told the money was transferred, that there was no more money. This past summer, we wrote almost 35 emails to you, Mr. Huckleberry, and letters with copies to all of you to continue to let us know about our needs. We continue to be told there's no money. Mr. Huckleberry, you maintain in your 8/1/2014 memorandum that money could be available if there's an increase in sales tax. Nowhere do you call for a complete review of the current budget to find money to ensure my neighborhood's safety, nor any plan to do so in the future. Any responses we received from you, Mr. Huckleberry, were to tell us over and over there's no money for road repaving in our neighborhood. And I say, how can this be? If the budget allows for $400,000 annual office expenses per supervisor, and there was so much excess money that some of it is used to fund your personal charity choices, then I recommend that your budgets be reduced by at least 10% or 10% donated to the general fund for roads. In 1 year, that budget savings alone would provide the approximately $200,000 needed to repave my neighborhood streets. The taxes I pay are required by law and are not charitable contributions to be directed by the Board of Supervisors. My taxes should be used only for official, lawful, and impactful purposes in running the county. That includes the repaving of my neighborhood streets, not parties for public officials or donations to charities. Please stop this practice. Thank you.
Mary Ann Murphy.
Buenos tardes. I love when I get to say that. I am a child of the 60s. I survived. You know, we've been through this before. We had Watergate, presidential assassinations, Iran-Contra, whatever. You owe people an explanation. Someone like me, I've been coming up here for over a year now, seeking information, trying to redress grievances. Things are kind of crazy in Green Valley, kind of crazy, and you're all responsible for unincorporated Pima County. Far be it from me to refer to it as a town. Office expenses, Green Valley is a peculiar setup. It has been all along. It's made Mr. Carroll an absentee supervisor between anybody from the county down there with the Green Valley Council running the town. He doesn't have to be there at all. Everybody says that the county, everybody, that's fine. Pima County and the Green Valley Council, they have Green Valley under such great control, you know, that they shouldn't consider incorporation. Anyways, office budgets. That CMG engineering report, $500,000. I was not coming to these meetings when that was voted on, but it's complete. I want to review it. No one else does. No one has turned a page, but I can't get at the only hard copy that exists. Office expenditures in Green Valley don't include a hard copy of the drainageway inspections. The only hard copy is housed over at the Green Valley Council office, where I have been barred. Is that comical, Mr. Carroll? I know you think it is, because Stan the man runs it in Green Valley. Anyways, I want that copy. I have ordered one. I've been told it will cost me $200. I want a professional copy. I want whatever was provided to Green Valley, and if you can't find that budget amount to provide to the only citizen that gives a damn, well, what can I say? I said, crank it out, send me the bill. Thank you very much.
That concludes our speakers. What's the pleasure of the board?
Chair,
Supervisor Miller.
I move that we end the practice of allocating office expenses for charitable or outside organizations. I think it is clear this is not a good practice. The citizens don't like it. It is not transparent, and and we need to stop this practice altogether.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second for sake of discussion on the item to continue this discussion. I'm happy to. I do, for the record, want to make sure that this is completely discussed and that there's actions or future agenda items related to this item. I think I have the background material I need to proceed. So I'm welcoming any discussion we have about the item. Thank you.
Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Elias.
I've heard comments from the public, and I think you guys have made some very good, strong comments and made it clear that you're concerned that there's not complete transparency regarding this issue. And I recognize that, and I hear that, and I have great respect for that issue. And I have great respect for you all coming here and speaking to us as taxpayers about this. So, I also understand that people in my district have great needs. And the funding that we've done with nonprofits has gone to human service providers who have provided a return to the public in what they've offered folks. And I have not been funding advocacy organizations that just sit around and play office. So there is a significant difference in that. But given all of that, and given the fact that there are questions surrounding this issue, I think that we should move forward, and I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Proceed.
My substitute motion would be that all expenditures of board offices in their operating budgets be approved by the Board of Supervisors as a whole, with the exception of salaries, office supplies, and travel. So that there will be the light of day on every single expenditure that's made, and the public will have a chance to comment on that, and all of us would have the opportunity to vote on it in public. And I would instruct Mr. Huckleberry and his staff to come forward with a cogent written policy in regards to this by probably the second meeting in December, so they have some time to work on it because it's fairly complicated. And until that time, if any questions come up regarding office spending, let's put them on the agenda and vote for them right in front of God and everybody, so that the public has complete knowledge and there's complete transparency up until that time, even while that policy is being written, because I think it's time for us to put this question to bed, because I don't believe we've broken any laws. I don't believe we've done anything immoral, but what we need to do is make sure that the public has the right to know, and I certainly understand that. So that's my motion.
Is there a second? Supervisor Carroll.
I'll ask,
I need a second.
I'll ask if it's possible, I'd like to second that motion and continue the discussion on the vein of transparency. I do believe that if you look at, for example, my office budget, I'd like to ask if I could have a moment to ask the motion maker, as long as I've seconded this. Basically, when you look at most office budgets and you break them down into a simple pie chart, so even anybody could look at the breakdown and realize there's a lot of obvious personnel services. That's your salaries and benefits, etc. Supplies and services, you're talking about office supplies and computers and IT, etc., I imagine. Travel includes your motor pool. There's really only 3 categories that you've outlined to be direct spending by the supervisor, and everything else is to be put in front of the agenda.
If you want to take your staff out to breakfast at the Ritz-Carlton, put it on the agenda.
Let me ask you this, Supervisor. Let's say that out of a budget, let's say that out of your budget, you have say 16, 15, 20%, which is surplus, or which has not been spent. You then also have your choice to return that to the general fund at the end of the year, as I've done over the years.
Of course, all of
Yes,
us
we all
have returned
have.
amounts.
Yeah.
All of us have done that.
Pardon me, I appreciate that, but I was speaking directly about my office that I've charted out here. I don't see that that's a problem for us in District 4. This way, if I have an expected expense, travel related for one of my board appointments, either CSA or NACO, I would put it up front on the agenda, even though it's not required by your motion. I would still go even further.
That would be your prerogative, sir.
Okay, but I also want to mention that if I did have something that were to be funded in any of the other categories, you could guarantee that I could get it on a Thursday, the agenda, and probably if it was that short of a fuse, I could have it approved by Tuesday.
Point of order, Madam Chair, I think we're getting way off topic here. We're
No.
talking
No.
about discretionary spending
I'm
for
just asking
donations.
the maker of the motion to clarify what his intention is, because it's pretty.
Well,
pretty,
on the agenda, it's listed as operating expenses. These are all operating expenses.
I have I thought, reasonable questions. Your categories again, Mr. Elias, personnel services being everything related to
Salaries,
salaries and benefits.
benefits.
My supplies for office as well as my TI supplies, or IT supplies. And I guess travel and motor pool would be the round out of the three major expense categories that we have. And even though you say those could be excluded from the report, I wouldn't mind those being included. I
wouldn't
really
either.
don't. So-
I wouldn't either, but considering the fact that those are typical.
Well, those, and they're ongoing and they're repetitive, and I understand why you are excluding those. They're ordinary expenses. Ordinary reoccurring
So anything
expenses.
out of the ordinary,
And the fact
we vote on in
is,
this
and
room.
the fact is, they're already available online. Anybody can view our budget. This is already there.
absolutely.
So-
I like the fact that it would be on the agenda and would have to be voted on by the board, and therefore, if there was someone that wished to pull an item off, whether it's on a consent calendar for supervisor spending report, they can do so and question whether it was any
Absolutely.
of the items that I might have disagreed with or agreed with. You're ready for that, I guess.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Supervisor Valdez.
Madam Chair, I have this question of the maker of the motion. Obviously, we're talking right now about operating expenditures of, well, it's allocation of office operating expenditures. But my question is the following. If we're talking about our budgets, obviously we have budgetary authority for the entire county. Are we including all other elected officials of the county?
You know, I think that that's something we can work out when we create that policy that's in writing. But for right now, just to show the goodwill of the board, I'm asking board members to do that until we have a written policy in front of us that we can all vote up and down on. That way it gives the row officers an opportunity to have some input in the discussion as well.
Okay, I'm confused about your motion, and you want to restate it?
Yes, I'm saying that personnel, travel, office supplies and IT, those expenses not be included as items that we need to vote on here as the Board of Supervisors. But all other extraordinary expenditures, we would vote on.
But all other
As this
line
board.
item expenditures on our budget, in our budgets.
That's correct.
We're excluding personnel and
Travel,
travel.
IT, and office
Office.
supplies. And as far as the row officers go, because you're right, Supervisor Valadez, it does come up time to time that row officers spend money in this area, particularly the county attorney with RICO funds and others, but we give them that opportunity to have that discussion so that that's included in the policy that Mr. Huckleberry presents to us at that second meeting in December.
One more question for you, Mr. Elias.
Were you through, Supervisor Valadez?
Okay,
A little bit.
If we could, indulge him.
we will. I'm
Thank you.
sorry, I
Thank you,
didn't realize he
Supervisor.
wasn't finished.
My question, my follow-up question to that is, I understand your point. I'm not sure I agree with it necessarily.
That's fine.
simply because I think it applies to all elected officials. If we're gonna make it apply to any one of us, it applies to all of us. I think RICO, both at the county attorney and at the sheriff's department, are statutorily set so that this policy wouldn't affect the RICO funds.
I recognize that, but just for the sake of transparency, I think that, it would be okay to look at those items as well. But again, I want to give staff and our lawyers that opportunity to take a look at that in discussion with the row officers, so that when we have a written policy in front of us to ratify in December, that we can make an educated decision about that. But without having those folks here to defend themselves or defend any practices of their offices, that's not probably an appropriate thing to do at this juncture.
Okay, I then still remain confused. Your motion sounds like to me that you want to put the item immediately into effect, starting today.
I think it would be a good idea to show the public that we are concerned about transparency, and that we all can kind of keep ourselves in line here while we're waiting for this policy to be written in December.
Okay, so
that way there's not a perception that we're
Okay,
just
I
trying to
think
dodge.
that you're trying to talk about two motions then.
Okay.
And your first one is that effective today, and I'm not sure since this is a policy and probably changes procedure whether we can even legally move forward, but you want us to immediately make this information available.
I think it
That
would
means
be
that
best.
our IT staff, and I mean, you're tasking them with doing something they're not going to be able to do right away.
Madam Chair, if I may try and clarify. I believe that what Supervisor Elias is doing is he's saying from this point forward, an expense out of our office budget that is other than personnel, travel, or office supplies has to become an agenda item until such time as a follow-up policy is developed. Effective today, not retroactively.
Okay, is that
That's
your
correct.
motion?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Madam Chair?
Then, and we have a second. Then let me ask, Chris, can we do this now without,
Madam Chair, members of the board, I see no impediment to that
Okay.
unless, I'm trying to envision what all, certainly to the extent it includes a specific issue, that's not a problem. I'm not aware of any other issue, but maybe Mr. Huckleberry
because
is
we're not
a practical
talking about an ordinance, is that right? We're talking
That's
about
correct. What we're
policy.
doing is we're talking about how the board allocates its budgets, and that's perfectly permissible.
Okay, Mr. Huckleberry.
Yes.
Oh, okay, let Mr. Huckleberry was going to respond.
Why not?
And then we'll-
Make me
we'll
go
come back.
last, Sharon. Go ahead.
All I was going to point out, it's very easy to do. All of your budgets, your office budgets are published and online anyway, the adopted
Exactly.
budget. All we'll simply do is take and highlight those areas like travel, office supplies, and we can highlight that right on your budget page and say, those are exempt, everything else is subject to the policy you're going to adopt.
Okay, got it. Supervisor Miller.
So my understanding, according to Supervisor Elias's motion, is that these expenditures for allocating of office expenses to outside organizations and nonprofits is going to continue to be allowed, but you're going to have it come before the board for a vote.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to understand your motion.
Thank you. Okay, we have Supervisor Valadez.
Madam Chair, I assume you will allow a motion after this, whatever the outcome is of this?
Because we still have to really talk about the policy
Going forward.
going forward.
Okay.
Okay. Indeed. So why don't we do a roll call vote on that particular motion? On the substitute motion.
Supervisor Carroll. Supervisor Elias.
Aye.
Supervisor Miller.
Absolutely not.
Supervisor Valadez.
Aye.
Chair Brunson.
Aye, motion carries 4-1. Supervisor Valadez regarding the policy issue.
Madam Chair, I'm glad that we took that step, because obviously one of the issues, and I mentioned it the last time we had this discussion, I agree with Mr. Hernandez about the transparency. Obviously I haven't done those expenditures out of my budget, but I don't believe anything is wrong with those expenditures. That's my opinion, clearly, that's shared by some and disagreed with by others. But the point being that, and the point that I made at that meeting was that the public has a right to know and should know. But going forward, I think we need to have a more comprehensive policy. And I think for right now, obviously, I pointed out that the RICO funds of both the Sheriff's Department and the county attorneys are very separate funds. So I think we probably need to limit this to general fund monies. And instruct staff to look going forward at how do we do this? Is with the understanding that what we want to do is we want to be as transparent going forward as possible. So that the public has one or more bites at the apple to make sure that their voice is heard on whether or not they believe that these monies are an appropriate expenditure. Because that's my issue, is that transparency. Maybe it's appropriate to have the outside agency review it on a regular basis, and maybe this board considers such expenditures going forward, maybe quarterly. So I put that out there as a thought and open for discussion.
Well, actually, I appreciate that, because if you look at the policy as it speaks to small allocations of funds, and I think Ms. Kovalik mentioned it, it's a $5,000 limit. I think we do need more transparency, and we need more clarity. If it's for a public purpose, it needs to be defined what that public purpose is. So I absolutely agree with you that we need a policy. My concern moving forward is the county has allocated money for going back to the beginning of the county for outside agencies that serve a public purpose. We do that largely sometimes through federal dollars with community development block grant monies, sometimes through state dollars, and sometimes through local general fund dollars. But the point is, we do it. We have a policy where an outside agency reviews it on a yearly basis, and then when we adopt a budget in July.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
Outside agency review committee. You said outside agency. I'm sorry.
Oh, outside agency review committee. Thank you. And these are large. These are usually over $5,000. These types of grants. My concern, is given my district, we have many smaller 501c3s where smaller dollar donations grants serve a public purpose that is very real, but is something outside agency has not in the past reviewed. Now, maybe the way to deal with this, with the smaller dollars, that to the smaller organizations, is to have the outside agency review it and then come to us for approval. I don't have any problem with that, but in terms of trying to craft a policy on the fly, if you will, I would be unwilling to develop a policy from the dais today, but I would like to direct staff to look at and include all elected officials, not just the Board of Supervisors, develop a policy that addresses these smaller dollar amounts and the best way to do it. My suggestion is it get reviewed through outside agency, but there may be better ways to do it. And again, I think that's a policy discussion that needs to be had, but I don't think it's something that we today are ready to pursue. So if we had a motion to that effect and directing, or just can we just give staff direction? Do we need a motion?
I think you can give staff just direction. I don't think you need a motion. We already have a motion and decision on the item, so to avoid any confusion, just staff direction would be fine. We'll come back
And I think then, in terms of the issue related to the Goldwater item, the Goldwater letter, we can let Goldwater Institute know that we are in the process of developing such a policy.
Yeah, you can direct us to do that. We will let them know kind of where we're at. Makes sense.
Supervisor Valdez.
And for the sake of just staff clarification, the intent of this policy is actually to replace what this board just adopted right now. Just a few minutes ago.
Is that, everybody comfortable with that direction? So we will, at this point, develop a new policy related to small dollar grants to public institutions and charities, and bring it back for board approval. And what's the time frame on this, Mr. Huckleberry? I was
Madam
hoping
Chair,
probably
I would like to go-
mid-December if
I
possible.
would just like to go on the record objecting to this, just because of the fact that you're going to continue allowing donation of monies to outside agencies and charities.
We donate out, we have grants to outside agencies and charities. And we've done it on a regular basis through outside agencies or through individual offices. So you're opposing any outside agency grants? Is that-
Absolutely, I've never done it since I've been in office, and according to Goldwater Institute, it is now legal according to the statute.
That is an allegation, that is an
That is
assertion, that is
I said
not.
that's according to Goldwater Institute, I didn't say that
Thank
was
you.
anybody else's statement, but that's why I do object to developing any policy that continues to allow this practice.
Madam Chair.
I don't think that was the intent of the motion, or the intent of the direction, but that's your interpretation.
Are you-
Supervisor
are you-
Carroll.
Are you ending the practice of outside donations? That was my understanding, is you're going to continue allowing donations to outside agencies and organizations. Is that, did I misunderstand?
We currently, through either outside agencies or our offices, do it, and that practice will continue. What we're asking is that a policy on the smaller amounts come back, and in that policy, it includes a vehicle that would require approval by the outside agency and the board, well, suggesting that it include another review process and then come to the entire board for approval.
And that gets back to my original objection. I object completely to this practice period, so I do object to it. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Carroll.
I want to back up and say, right now, currently, Pima County operates at an arm's length by giving our outside agency commission members a myriad of choices as far as grants that are applied for and grants that are rewarded. That's an arm's length committee that makes these decisions, and it's a legal structure. You can stop me, Chris or Chuck. Currently, we have this commission in place, and I'm sure that District 1 has an appointment to that commission, and we vote at the annual budget to apply these outside agency grants.
But that's a different
CDBG.
item than from
Pardon me,
individual
I'm
offices.
trying to clarify, but I've never been able to stop with my thought process yet. Mr. Huckleberry, if you have outside agencies now ratifying and distributing the dollars, could they expand that practice to ratify and distribute dollars for supervisors, offices that are interested in forwarding those grants or those applications back to the commission for ratification? Right or wrong? Can they expand their duties by working for the board as they do now, but on these smaller grant items if they come through?
Madam Chairman, Supervisor Carroll, the short answer is yes.
Well, I think it's very clear. It's a second layer. What I think the rub or the concern was, or the real complaint that was made by the Goldwater Institute was these were arbitrary. There was no commission that reviewed them. They were granted from an elected office directly to a nonprofit. I thought that was their concern. They're not concerned with our outside agency grants, are they? That are made through the budget process?
It's not clear.
Madam Chair and members of the board, when you look at the outside agency review process, it's one where there's a lump sum appropriation by the board. The grants are then competitively applied for through the community. They have to be eligible to a nonprofit 501c3, federally approved, and they have to provide a public purpose, and they have to disclose that public purpose when receiving that grant. As I stated, it's a competitive process. They're ranked, they're evaluated, and they're recommended to this board. This board then approves the allocations and the contracts that are entered into between the county and a particular nonprofit entity providing public purpose functions. That is the outside agency review process. And as I have indicated, it's probably appropriate for us to probably look at those policies as well, because when you look at the Goldwater letter, you could confuse the two. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And so I think the board's direction is to simply freeze those items that is in your individual budgets that has not been mentioned. And if there are appropriations made from them, they have to come to the full board. And I don't know what particular categories those are other than those, because as I've indicated, each of your budgets are unique to your office, and they have different line items and different classifications and categories. We'll get you that information, and then I think the staff and I am prepared to come back to you in the second meeting in December as instructed in the motion to provide you with full recommendations on policy going forward.
And I guess Mike, go ahead, Supervisor Carroll.
Okay, but in the meantime, whether it's over partisan principle or whether it's just personal, if Supervisor Elias's motion holds, we still, until your policy
We
is,
did. We
and
passed it.
as long as it's now, and the meeting closes with it being intact, you have the right as a supervisor to deny those funding choices or not. And,
Exactly.
and that's right now, until the policy's developed, that's where we're standing on this. So, like someone said, I'd probably, although I don't give nonprofit dollars out, my choice might be different than the majority of this board, and they can vote it down. And controversially, on the other side, it could happen from Republicans voting down and picking off a Democrat not to support their choice. So thank you.
And to reiterate my concern, given my district and given the needs, I'm concerned that outside agencies largely dealt with big chunks. And what my office does is work with the smaller 501c3s and provide assistance. And I want to see some sort of mechanism that will allow those smaller organizations to have access to funds to meet the needs of those organizations and provide the public good that they do.
And Madam Chair, staff will provide the board with those policy options.
Thank you. You're done. Supervisor Valdez.
I just wanted to echo, I mean, obviously, there are two discussions going on here in terms of two separate issues. One issue is about that tends to be more microscopic, although of significant importance, the microscopic issue of whether or not this board wants to give money out of our budgets to nonprofits. The truth is, what we've done today, if you don't agree with it, vote no. You have that right. But the truth is that we also have to look at this macroscopically. And that's what, there's been an argument that's been tried to make that's false. The office dollars are general fund monies, they're tax dollars. Outside agency allocations are general fund monies, they're tax dollars. The argument and the farce that the Goldwater Institute is just going after allocations made by office budgets or office budgets from this board is false. The argument that they are making applies and affects all outside agency funding that this county does. So whether or not you agree with that, I think there's an important distinction here that has to be made. Their argument is it applies to all of it. So I think we need to be very, very careful going forward. You're not only splitting hairs, you're splitting the same hair. You can make the arguments about office budget, and like we said, you can just vote no. That's a choice. But the truth is, you're either going to be able to do both or not. Bottom line.
It's not either or, it's both and.
And I would note, Madam Chair, that the action that we took today puts all of those expenditures on the same level. Because actually, they're voted on twice. The outside agency review committee submits its recommendations to this board, which are then voted on. They're folded over into the budget and voted again on by this board of supervisors. So this puts those same kind of office budgets in that same thing where those individual expenditures are ratified by the board and the budgets themselves are ratified at budget time.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Miller.
What I read in the Goldwater letter did not say that. They were looking at whether or not they were justified expenditures to outside agencies. In other words, there had to be something given in return for the monies,
Absolutely
not just
correct.
a donation to the organization. And
We all agree.
And that was the gist of their letter. It wasn't splitting hairs, as Ramon said, or a farce.
But it was applying it to all outside agencies, and that was the problem.
And it was specific to supervisor budgets is what they were discussing in that letter. And if they are talking about the others, I think we have, as you said, we have a group of individuals, then I am an appointee to that board. It is federal grant money that we receive. The board works to decide, and as Mr. Huckleberry said, they have a very robust
Actually,
process.
the outside agency is not,
General fund
that
dollars.
it's general fund dollars.
There are some from general funds as well. I was talking about the federal grant monies that the board does, and then there's some general fund monies.
That's CDBG for the most part, and that's
But
directly from the
May I
board,
finish,
not
please?
the outside
May I finish,
agency.
please, before you interrupt me? They actually get an opportunity to review those, and if they have a service that they are providing in return, and it's documented what they are providing in return, that is what I read in the Goldwater letter. The issue with these individual supervisor donations is there was no documentation. We checked, we asked the procurement office, was there any documentation? Was there even a memo for what these services these donations were for? And I believe that is the thrust, and that is the issue that I have with it. If we have a specific rationale or a reason or a document that says we need this for
And
whatever service, then I don't have a problem, but
I think we're all in agreement, we want to see that. I don't think there's anybody in this board that disagrees with what you said.
Well, and actually,
and
when we receive requests for any dollars that are expended out of our office budget, we require that nonprofit to state what those dollars are going to be spent
Yeah,
on,
exactly.
so that we ensure that there is a return to the public on that, and those letters are audited by finance and risk management, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Huckleberry, that's correct?
Before
For
the
accuracy, to
expenditure,
make
we
sure
have
that
to
there
have the
is a
letter.
legitimate purpose in making those
And
expenditures.
when we asked
So
for them, we
that's
could not
completely
get
untrue.
copies.
And then Supervisor Miller says that federal dollars are reviewed by the outside agency committee?
No, they're
That's
not.
not true. Okay, just
That
as
is
long
not-
as that's
what I was
understood.
talking about.
Because that is not true. There's a different process that requires the public to be involved in
That's right.
examining what's going to be
That's
done with
right.
CDBG dollars. So that's a different animal entirely.
Okay, I think we've exhausted this topic at this point, and if there are no objections, I'd like to move to the next item, which is clerk of the board and amendment of board